Whether you're interested in unidentified aerial phenomena, non human intelligence, or cryptoterrestrials, this is going to be a paper that is going to, I think, blow your mind. At least mine was. And if you haven't read The Crypto Hypothesis, A Case for Scientific Openness to a Concealed Earthly Explanation for Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, no problem. I'm going to cover the highlights. And by highlights, I quite literally mean all my highlights. Probably too many, but I'll try to keep it brief. In the description, I'm going to have the link to the paper. There you will be able to read the whole thing for yourself, and you'll be able to check out the authors in more detail. You can click on them and see their profile. We have Tim Lomas from Harvard University, Michael Paul Masters from Montana Tech of the University of Montana, and Brendan Case from Harvard University. And this paper is fascinating stuff. And the abstract says, recent years have seen increasing public attention and indeed concern regarding unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP. Hypotheses for such phenomena tend to fall into two classes: a conventional terrestrial explanation, like human-made technology, or an extraterrestrial explanation, such as advanced civilizations from elsewhere in the cosmos. However, there is also a third minority class of hypothesis, an unconventional terrestrial explanation outside the prevailing consensus view of the universe. This is the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis, which includes as a subset the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, namely the notion that UAPs may reflect activities of intelligent beings concealed in stealth here on Earth, such as being underground, and or its near environments like the moon, and or even walking among us, passing as humans. Although this idea is likely to be regarded skeptically by most scientists, such are the nature of some UAP that we argue this possibility should not be dismissed and deserves genuine consideration. And I agree, and that's what we're going to be doing today. Okay. So essentially, in this first paragraph, it kind of summarizes again that we have the two ways of looking at it. We have our terrestrial origins, such as human technology. We have extraterrestrial origins, so coming outside of Earth or arriving from elsewhere. But people who have studied UAPs and NHIs, they have been forced to deal with this other possibility of cryptoterrestrials. And it is stated here that originally the authors, or at least one of the authors' masters, was working on the interdimensional hypothesis, which was the previous paper. And let me know if you want me to pull that up and we can go over it together. And essentially, as they were dealing with the information there, and then also talking about the extraterrestrial, which deals with the whole traveling humans, time traveling, that at the end of the day, they had to kind of come back and write a paper about the evidence and theory that supports another theory called ultra-terrestrial or cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, which is the focus of the paper here. And it holds that UAPs may reflect activities of NHIs concealed here on Earth, that they could be located underground or its nearby environments. And someone you may be familiar with, Bernardo Kastrup, he recently said that, despite that cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, despite its seemingly outlandish, unlikely, and far out nature, it's the most reasonable scenario for UAP and NHI. And I can see maybe his thought process there. So regardless of whether it is, I guess, more likely true than not, there is enough evidence to consider it in terms of science. And it's brought up several times in this paper, and I believe rightfully so, that you cannot just dismiss it because it would be better if it was, gone, go away with you theory. But if there is any kind of supportive science, you have to give it the proper time and attention. So that way we know whether we should cross it off the list for good or not. I think it's an important thing to consider when dealing with science, especially some of these more kind of harder to wrap your mind around hypotheses, because we may have a tendency that just because we don't like it or what makes us question life or religion, whatever the case may be, we then have a tendency to just, it can't exist. It's just no way it can't exist because it would be easier perhaps for you for that to be the case. I actually love questioning my beliefs and theories of reality. So for me, this is just par for the course. So essentially, the paper goes into 5 sections and really looks at the viability of the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis in regards to the limits of historical and geological knowledge, the traces of lost civilizations, traces of underground civilizations, traditions around magical cryptoterrestrials, and UAP related activity that are been found underground, underwater, and nearby at the moon. I mean, how fun does this publication sound? Then it goes on to state that the A in aerial now denotes anomalous, essentially, because we have anomalies that are not just found in the air, because we've seen UAPs capable of traveling underwater. So just really pointing out that this was necessary because we have so many encounters into the mountain, under the water, and the like. Also, next, it's pointed out that UFO sightings have been happening for a long time and they are still very common, as we all know, especially these days. Then we have in May of 2023, Dr. Kirkpatrick, the director of AARO, who has since left his post. He argued that a majority probably did have conventional explanations and currently remained unidentified only through lack of good data that would allow identification. However, around 2 to 5% of the 800, so roughly 15 to 40, were possibly really anomalous. Well, it only takes one, to be honest. It only takes one truly anomalous to kind of prove it to be possible or true. Even if 99% of all the whistleblowers are lying, if one isn't, that we have NHI, that we've been doing craft retrieval programs, in a way, it's kind of enough because you only need in science one thing to prove something radically true in order to change the narrative, or at least to be looking more into it. So even by saying that, I consider that to be a win. It's been suggested that people here may be deliberately downplaying the topic and concealing the extraordinary nature of many UAP related events. Most likely, I think we all know that that's probably true. Then they talk about Project Blue Book, which served to minimize the significance of UAPs and often just to deny their reality at all. We even have General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in August of 2023, stating that the military can explain a lot of it, talking about UAPs, but there is some that's really kind of weird and unexplainable. We have many whistleblowers that we can talk about their claims here in this paper. In June 2023, we have David Grush. He went to the US government and worked for the US government and private aerospace companies. And that, sorry, I'll just reread that. David Grush, who alleged that the US government and private aerospace companies had for decades maintained a secret crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. Then, after he gave his testimony, he went and spoke to them in private, the House Oversight Committee. And after having a briefing, we have Representative Moskowitz posted on X that based on what we heard, many of Grush's claims have merit. And Representative Burchett in 2024 stated, I think everybody left there thinking and knowing that Grush is legit. We have retired Army Colonel Carl Nell, who talked about how he has worked with him and considers him to be extremely reliable. And mentioned in May of 2024 that, and I quote, so non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new and it's been ongoing, and unelected people in the government are aware of that. He was then asked how confidently he was with his statement, and he responded, there's zero doubt. So Very interesting statement in connection to Gresh's testimony. We also have Tim Gaudet, the former head of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And he was responsible for monitoring oceanic and atmospheric conditions. And he said in an interview, I am totally convinced that we're experiencing a non human higher intelligence. I am completely convinced because I know the people who were in the government programs, the legacy programs, that oversaw both the crash retrieval and just the analysis of UAP data. And I'm very confident in these people, former intelligence, former DOD, and we are working as a team behind the scenes to advance disclosure. Moreover, when asked, is there a chance some of that we're seeing is adversarial? He then stated, no, I don't think so. I've been read in on all the threats. I had high clearance, top secret, special, compartmented information, and I know that our adversaries don't have technologies like these. So then we get to some of the things that have happened within the government. And in July of 2023, Chuck Schumer, the majority leader of the Senate, introduced bipartisan proposals for the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure Act. And so the purpose, as reported by the New York Times, was to create a commission with broad authority to declassify government documents about UFO and extraterrestrial matters, basically stating that the American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins. Interestingly, it then says non-human intelligence, as well as unexplained phenomena. Of course, the proposal faced resistance, and a little bit of it was allowed to pass in December of 2023. So the provisions that were retained still contain some striking legislation and language, not least referring explicitly to non-human intelligence in relation to UAP. And that's a pretty big deal. That's something I'm very interested in since diving down kind of the plasmoid rabbit hole, trying to determine, what is the deal with non-human intelligence and how do these pieces fit together, which is one of the ways I ended up getting to this paper. But I found that to be a very interesting fact. So again, it's brought up science is obligated to investigate. We should not put our opinion or wishes into the science. We just need to kind of follow the facts, the scientific breadcrumbs. Later brings up that, in fact, non-human intelligence in the Disclosure Act appeared 22 times, and this is interesting, was defined as any sentient, intelligent, non-human life form, regardless of nature or ultimate origin, that may be presumed responsible for unidentified anomalous phenomena or of which the federal government has become aware. The wording implies that there are two classes of explanation above and that they're not the only possible ones. But I thought this was super interesting the way they defined it. Any sentient, intelligent, non-human life form, regardless of nature or ultimate origin. Crazy. So then we have an interview by Ross Coulthart and Gresh from News Nation in 2023. And when asked if the government had been concealing the existence on this planet of alien life, he pointedly clarified, I would not couch it as non-human intelligence because I don't necessarily want to denote origin. I don't think we have all the data to say, oh, they're coming from a certain location. Okay, so that they are actually not much more advanced than you and I, saying, if I were a betting man, some of these NHI, they're similarly as advanced as us, but they're made asymmetric evolution or whatever. They went a different path. Where we made nuclear weapons and stuff, they ended up making this civil propulsion kind of equivalent discovery where they're able to do this now. It's an interesting point. So there is an emerging debate around other possibilities, and this is talking about, sorry, I'm going to have to get a drink here. Put off in 2022 defines this as possibly sequestered terrestrial cultures existing alongside us in distinct stealth. In that respect, Puthoff offers a taxonomy of such hypotheses, including extra-dimensional, cryptoterrestrial, demonic jinn, proto-ancient human, and time travelers, etc., or some combination or mutation of any of these. Well, that's a lot of possibility right there. Many find an extraterrestrial hypothesis for UAP incredible enough, as evidenced by dismissive reactions to Gresh's allegations by outspoken figures like Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm sure many of you are aware of how he feels about not just Gresh's allegations, but pretty much all UAP related things. However, it is the mission of science to investigate all aspects. And that's true. It truly, truly is. So then we'll talk about Gary Nolan. I'm sure many of you are familiar with him and his amazing work and the great podcast he's done. But he is the endowed chair at Stanford. He is an immunologist who has for the past decade been involved in UAP research. In an interview with Coulthart again, he was posed with a similar question to the one that he had asked Grush, and he received a comparably ambiguous answer. You believe on the evidence that there is a non-human intelligence of advanced technology on this planet. And Nolan replied, advanced capabilities? No, I don't know whether it's a technology per se, because I'm leaving open the idea that it's some form of consciousness that is non-material. And I know, say to my colleagues out there, this sounds absolutely crazy. But if you've seen the things I've seen, you would only be able to come to a similar conclusion. Well, Mr. Nolan, I would love to see the things you've seen. So let me know if you'll take me up on my offer. So indeed, there are many potential hypotheses, especially when one makes fine-grained distinctions between different versions of explanations. So we're talking about Gresh's allegations again, and at a conference convened in November by the newly launched Soul Foundation, which brings together experts from academia and government to address the philosophical, policy, and scientific problems raised by the likely presence on the Earth of UAPs. There we have Colonel Carl Nell, who presented a detailed taxonomy of possible UAP explanations involving 72 different hypotheses organized into 14 categories. These included 20 that he categorizes as ultra-terrestrial, which he defined as any sentient life form, regardless of ultimate origin, that had resided on Earth or in its environs, under land, undersea, aerospace, on the moon, for significant duration in a semi-permanent, albeit covert, status, excluding humans from modern-day civilization and their known antecedents, with 4 of these being cryptoterrestrials specifically, as discussed in the conclusion. However, we would argue that his definition of ultra-terrestrial and the 20 hypotheses he selects for this better fit for cryptoterrestrial hypotheses in particular. Okay. Within the broad ultra-terrestrial category, one theory or collection of theories, if differentiated into a fine-grained way, is the interdimensional hypothesis. This suggests UAP may involve beings from dimensions that coexist alongside the 4 dimensions of space-time humans usually perceive. We have Representative Luna stating, I think it's important to listen to the specific words that Gresh uses. Gresh never said extraterrestrial or alien. He said interdimensional. It's actually a very good point. Then it is brought up that we have a very large contingent of biblically minded people within the Pentagon who have sought to shut down investigations into the UAP based on the fear that they may actually involve demons coming from hell. That quote comes from Ron James. I'm curious to know what you think about that. Then we have a hypothesis which could, depending on how it is construed, be regarded as ultra-terrestrial, and that's talking about time travelers, which is now being given serious consideration, most notably by Masters, and he calls this the extra-tempestrial explanation. If I haven't mentioned this already, I saw Masters on the Julian Dory podcast, and I think they did an episode about a month ago. It was really, really good. I highly suggest you check it out after you finish this publication with me. So then we have Puthoff, who's claimed that there could actually be an ancient occult group, isolated pre Diluvian high tech society existing alongside us in distinct stealth. Unless this advanced technology has been developed by an early civilization on Earth whose traces have since disappeared, which is a possibility, or likewise, it could be gifted to us by extraterrestrial visitors. That's a possibility. One of the other means it could have been acquired would be if this technology came from time travelers, which is very interesting, which kind of makes sense because if they were, just evolved versions of us and they thought we could benefit from something, I think if we had that capability, let me know if you would, you might be tempted to kind of go back in time and help them out, especially if you thought it would save humanity or give humanity a better chance. So, the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis suggests that non human intelligence responsible for UAPs may already be present in Earth's environment in some sense, as opposed to an extraterrestrial explanation. And again, they bring up the other theories, such as interdimensional hypotheses. Then we have the extraterrestrial, which is talking about time travel. So, there are a lot of things to consider here, but at this point, nothing's really off the table. In fact, these authors state that, honestly, in the past few years, they would have rated this theory as having a 1% chance of being true. Now, in light of the things that we're about to discuss, they put it about 10%. I appreciate their honesty here, and it also goes to show really how science should be dealt with or done. You follow the evidence, see how the pieces fit, give everything its due consideration, and I appreciate their honesty there. Okay. So it talks about how we have UAPs that are not only in the air, but can move underwater in ways that their airborne counterparts can not. We have a white paper by retired Rear Admiral Tim Gaudet that talks about these unidentified submersible objects and how they act in ways that really do surpass human technology and challenge the scientific understanding of what is possible. McGregor in 2023 summarizes the situation by saying these objects have been observed to behave in ways that defy our current understanding of physics, much like their aerial counterparts. They are said to move at incredible speeds, are capable of sudden rapid acceleration, deceleration, and directional changes, all without any visible means of propulsion. Then it goes into some examples where they have recorded such UAP type events or USO events, which are unidentified submersed objects. And it says that 50% of UFO encounters are connected with the oceans, 15 more with lakes. So UFOs overall do tend to stick to water, which is actually an important point for this theory because it's stating that if we have some cryptoterrestrials living, let's say, inside of mountains or underwater, this perhaps may be their way of kind of traveling to and fro. We then have the UAP Disclosure Act, which importantly does have mention of damaged or intact ocean surface and undersea craft associated with unidentified anomalous phenomena. So basically, they're saying that this needs to be considered because even for the Disclosure Act, they put it in the kind of wording of the paper. So there must be enough evidence that this has a possibility. We have Nolan stating in an interview when asked if whatever this is coming from outside our atmosphere or from beneath our ocean. He replied, both, adding with respect to undersea activity that sonar images show these things moving at speeds a dozen times faster than our fastest submarines. Fascinating. They also then bring up the USS Nimitz nuclear aircraft carrier. Then getting into Lou Elizondo, a former intelligence officer closely linked to U.S. investigations into UAP, talking about a military encounter in the Caribbean in which a circular object about the size of a small island rose up from the deep on two separate occasions. We have areas acting as hotspots, like this volcano in central Mexico, where many UAPs have been observed. So, various hypotheses have been touted about these observations. And in fact, it's considered or called an intergalactic gateway between two locations in space time. However, some people speculate that the UAP might not only be drawn to such locales. uh, in terms of gathering energy, but might be coming from underground because that's where the NHIs are residing in a subterranean way. Similarly, there are rumors of underwater bases and areas notable for reports of UAP entering or exiting the water, as discussed below. We have Mike Gallagher, the representative in 2023, noted that one potential explanation for UAP is, and I quote, an ancient civilization that's just been hiding here for all this time and is suddenly showing itself right now. Could be. Okay. Gonna have to skip ahead a little bit here. Then it talks about the hypothesis is better fit for people's purported experiences of NHIs over the decades, which most often involves entities with surprisingly similar physiognomy to humans, which one might not necessarily expect given the myriad of evolutionary pathways intelligent life might take in the cosmos. So, talking about how some interactions with these beings seemed like they could be evolved from Homo sapiens. However, if NHIs were cryptoterrestrial, their species may well be related to Homo sapiens in some ways, as discussed below, which would easily account for their resemblance. That said, given the widespread terrestrial evolutionary convergence, even across distantly related lineages, it is also possible that extraterrestrial NHI might well look like something like Homo sapiens. The NASA conspiracies, for example, include an interview with someone seemingly associated with the Gemini program who claimed there was a small band of individuals who represent the last vestiges of an ancient, advanced, isolated civilization responsible for the legends of Atlantis and similar stories, forced by circumstances to retreat into remote, sequestered locales for survival. Indeed, comparable testimony continues to emerge that lends further support to the CTH. An example is the apparent testimony of Dr. Shirley Wright, Albert Einstein's assistant in 1947. I found this fascinating. So she was speaking in 1993 in recordings which only became public in 2021. And Wright claimed she and Einstein had helped investigate the famous Roswell UAP crash. Incredibly, she said that this was not only a genuine UAP, but the biological entities had survived the crash and were subjected to questioning. Most relevantly here, she suggested that these were actually just humans, but an advanced form. As Verma summarizes, uh, that many of their species actually reside underground on our planet. On that point, former CIA officer John Ramirez claimed that the authorities conducted biological tests and were able to sequence something in those bodies that looked like a genome. And from there, they checked the human genome and saw correlations. Important stuff. To reiterate, this hypothesis carries a very low probability weighting, and even people open to it remain skeptical overall. However, you still have to consider the evidence. Another possibility is we could have a breakaway civilization in our hominin past. So it is definitely possible that we could not be aware of civilizations that have come before. It is definitely possible, since we are continuously discovering new things, that perhaps we just had a breakaway civilization. We went on our separate paths. And for that reason, they have kind of remained unnoticed. Then the paper goes into all the different discoveries we have made across the last 50 years that have kept pushing the timeline of when humans and advanced technologies were available. We even have something that I was unaware of a Stonehenge-like structure in Lake Michigan that is thought to be 10,000 years old. Then we have other sites in Java that feature megalithic constructions dating to between 25,000 and 14,000 BCE. So ultimately, it's stating that if such uncertainty is possible with events as recent as 11,000 years ago, this is just a blink of an eye in planetary terms. In terms of the Earth being 4.5 billion years old, there could have been a lot that happened that we are going to be unaware of. We also have poor resolution of the geological record. We're only able to look so far back into the past. So there's going to be a lot that we are unaware of. It could be that intelligent or even industrialized species might have long predated human existence on Earth, but vanished without leaving a discernible paleontological trace. They term this possibility the Solarian hypothesis. We have Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb putting it such as planets like Mars or Earth could have given multiple births to technological civilizations that were a billion years apart, and hence none of them were aware of each other. Like stable parents, the planets recovered from the environmental impact of these civilizations over time. Then we have Kastrup notes the viability of the Solarian hypotheses, suggesting that there has been plenty of time and opportunity for other non-human species to have arisen on Earth, developed to a level of technology far beyond ours, and then to have effectively vanished due to one or more myriad possible civilization-ending cataclysms. Makes perfect sense to me. The paper then goes into talking about the different technologies that we have created as of late, like the James Webb Telescope. Then we have NASA's Curiosity rover, and how based on just these two advancements, we have a lot of things that are challenging our assumptions on places like Mars. And it kind of lists all the different things that people have thought they've seen in some of the rovers kind of footage. It is then brought up that humans have this kind of habit of doing pareidolia, the tendency to perceive a specific, often meaningful image in random or ambiguous visual patterns. We often see eyes when we're looking at like maybe a bark on a tree. And it's just one of those things as humans that we do. We try to make sense of the world around. And in doing so, we try to take, either patterns or shapes and make them fit to things we know. So that could be the case for a lot of the things they have shown from Mars. But that being said, just because humans do have the tendency of taking anomalous objects and applying pareidolia, we would not want to discount it entirely, because as doing so, we would equally be conducting a cognitive bias that hinders us from studying evidence with due openness and objectivity. So just because sometimes, yes, it is pareidolia, doesn't mean that it always is. So we cannot discount absolutely everything. The general point is that if another intelligent species had inhabited Earth or Mars long before Homo sapiens, it is possible that we would have no idea. Also is talking about there are lots of places here on Earth that still need to be kind of further examined, explored. We have things like the Alaskan Triangle, which we do not know much about, is a hotspot for UAP activity and has like 20,000 unexplained disappearances in the area since the 1970s. Like after I get done with this, I'm going to have to triple check that fact because that just seems very high. And I live in Southern Oregon near Mount Shasta, and we have our fair number of people going or disappearing, but not 20,000. That is a lot. So then we have a little bit of a talk about the shadow biosphere. I did bring this up in the video I did about mere life. And we have the shadow biome, which could involve forms of weird life whose biochemistry is so non-standard that it would not be detected by life detection tools targeted at standard terrain biochemistry. This kind of idea has sometimes been known as the paraphysical hypothesis, which essentially denotes forms of life that are physical but are usually undetected and unknown to us. Crucially, though, it means that we have to have humility and realize that we cannot dismiss anything. We're still learning about our planet. We're still learning about us, humans. So we cannot just say, we know, and this is not possible because there's still evidence coming forward. Not to mention, we have traces of lost civilizations. All cultures have their myths and legends, and this is such an important point. There are, of course, many ways to interpret such tales, ranging from works of playful imagination to vehicles for conveying ethical teachings. However, there is an increasing appreciation that even if myths do involve such functions, they also sometimes, perhaps even often, actually are attempts by pre literate societies at memorializing or interpreting and communicating real historical events. I honestly think this is something a lot of us can agree with. The best example of this is all of the flood myths we have across geographical areas and traditions, everywhere from Sumeria to Israel. We have it in Greek society, India, all over the place. People have talked about these great floods. Even more relevantly here across world cultures are not only myths of flooding and rising seas, but of land and moreover civilizations being lost to these events, disappearing beneath the waters. Most famous is Atlantis, an island featured in Plato's work Timaeus and Critias. While some scholars suggest it is merely fictional, created for allegorical purposes, there are ongoing attempts to identify it as an actual location. And I absolutely enjoy watching everything done about that topic. Then it goes on to talk about other civilizations, such as Easter Island, that have really kind of blown apart our understanding of civilization in terms of advancement. Easter Island has likewise become a focus of speculation about lost civilizations. As a result of its remote island location in the Pacific, and with so many questions about its mysterious stone ruins, myriad caves, and as yet undeciphered script, it is not surprising that people have fantasized about this isolated and small pocket of land, including linking it to a technologically advanced and ancient civilization known as Mu or Lemuria, a hypothetical lost world which purportedly had created a globe spanning empire. So now we're talking about how such speculative thesis about a lost global empire goes far beyond what the CTH, the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis, really requires, vis-a-vis the possibility of a lost human civilization being responsible for some UAP, which only needs a civilization of whatever size to have existed at some point, and its members retreating and surviving underground. To that point, there are many rumored examples of lost civilizations, and similarly, if not civilizations per se, then areas of land that supported human populations, with those noted above just a handful among many. Moreover, we have some strange examples like Easter Island, in which scholars struggle to account for the level of societal complexity and technical sophistication in such a remote place. There are other potential sources of evidence for such civilizations. Then we also have the intriguing section about out of place artifacts, which I find to be very interesting. So we're going to touch on just a couple. We have the Colombo Falls in Zambia, where researchers in 2019 discovered an example of wood craftsmanship and technology involving two pieces of wood fashioned to interlock together that is dated to around 500,000 years ago, well before the emergence of Homo sapiens. Going back even further, we have workers at coal mine in Ukraine that found what appeared to be a fossilized imprint of a wheel in the sandstone roof of a tunnel that they had excavated 900 meters below the surface, which potentially dated back to being 300 million years old. Then we have a Russian team which found to be a 2 centimeter screw embedded in rock that was estimated to be 300 million years old. Or consider the photo shared of what appears to be a petrified book encased in rock in Western Australia, which some have interpreted as being possibly 350 million years old. And again, I'm going to state we have a lot of examples here. Sorry, I'm just turning off an alarm that's just going to go off in a second. About 10 minutes left before I have to get my daughter off the bus. So we have lots of examples here, and it really is only going to take one to be true to really blow our understanding kind of out of the water here. We also have traces of underground civilizations. There's the famous one in Derinkiyu in Turkey. And another good point is that, hey, we build civilizations under the ground all the time. We have the North American Aerospace Defense Command, which was built in under 2,000 feet of granite on 5 acres as a protective underground city. And the whole purpose is to shield occupants from threats. So if we're doing it, why wouldn't other people do it as well? It used to be theorized that people could not live deep underground. However, it was found in Russia, a 70-member sect lived in a bunker for nearly a decade, including 20 children, who many had never seen sunlight. So obviously, we have worries from sunlight deprivation, which would increase susceptibility to certain diseases, but somehow they did make it through that. So possibly others could as well. And many of our conclusions about what a kind of breakaway civilization would be capable of is with the assumption that they are just like us, this version of Homo sapiens today. But it's possible that they could have evolved and adapted a long time ago, and as a result, are able to live underground just fine. Then it talks about kind of a sidetracks a little bit, talking about Sasquatch and how it is possible that they are living among the forests in the North American areas. I live in Sasquatch territory. I've heard some strange things, but I have never seen anything. And I do know one of the strange sounds I heard ended up being a cow. So whatever that means. But the interesting point here is that we really only know about 20% of living mammal species. And the ones that we tend to know the least about are rodents and bats, two families with strong preferences for subterranean dens and nesting sites. So is it possible that one of these kind of evolved into something similar to a humanoid over time? Then we talk about all the different things that have kind of made us question our evolutionary past. We have the Chilean Atacama skeleton, which Nolan and Butte concluded was merely a human girl with many DNA mutations, nothing any more exotic. Then we also have the mummified bodies that were allegedly found in Peru in 2017 that had elongated heads and 3 fingers. So there's been a lot that's happened. And although nothing has been conclusive that it is actually of extraterrestrial origin or is a different species of a humanoid, it does kind of prove the point that at any moment we could have another discovery that could make us question everything. Of particular relevance here are claims of an intelligent cryptozoological species thriving underground. Across cultures are legends, for instance, of anthropomorphic reptilian races, such as the Nagas, a semi-divine species of half-human, half-serpent beings thought to reside in Patala, which is another world, venerated in Hinduism and Buddhism. Moreover, paleontologists have speculated whether such creatures could possibly have evolved from known zoological origins. They analyzed the morphological trends among dinosaurs towards bigger brains and upright posture in relation to a species called a troodon, and suggested that it had survived the mass extinction event 65 million years ago. And if it had, it would likely evolved into an upright reptilian-like figure they dubbed a dinosauroid. Crucially, some people argue it could have actually survived the extinction and continued to develop by retreating below ground, though it's unclear how viable this theory is. But what's intriguing is that reptilians have long been associated with the UAP topic, with speculation that some species does indeed represent an NHI and may be responsible for some UAPs. And as you know, many people believe they walk among us and are in our politics and so on. So then we have to ask the question, could sapiens or otherwise gone underground in the past? Though we do not have any direct or generally accepted evidence, it is not completely, should not be discounted. We have plenty of legends and myths that suggest that that could have actually been the case. And we have a fascination, in a sense, with many places underground. We have Sheol in the Hebrew teachings. We also have Shambhala in Tibetan Buddhist tradition. We have some interesting accounts of people who've tried to locate at least some of these locations, like Shambhala, for instance. And we've had explorers who have committed their lives to trying to find these sacred sites with civilizations of kind of non-human intelligences, perhaps, or breakaway civilization, but they're always kind of discussed as being this advanced civilization. Then we have the considerable interest in Mount Shasta, which I can attest to. There's a lot of weird things that happen out here, and that we have a lot of kind of a magnet for UAP, NHI, as well as disappearances. Mount Shasta continues to be notorious for unusual activity, which helps explain its growing appeal to spiritual pilgrims. Relatedly, the mountain is also infamous for the numerous disappearances in which people have gone missing without a trace. I'll have to look it up, but I definitely don't think it's 2,000 people. Then to return to our central UAP theme, we can note that the mountain is one of the most prominent UAP hotspots in the US. That's where a lot of them are seen. And so maybe it is because that is where they are coming to and from. Then we're going to point out in the last section here about the magical cryptoterrestrials. This idea is talking about within the boundaries, we have aliens on the ocean floor or subterranean hominids. That is possibly just make yourself at home, sweetie. I'll be done in a sec, okay?
What are you doing?
Just please. Sorry, my daughter just came home from school, so she's going to get herself a snack and then whoops, I hope. My daughter just came home from school. She's going to get herself a snack and we're going to finish up. We have magical cryptoterrestrials. This idea was not generally accepted by contemporary natural science paradigms. Nevertheless, it still fits into somewhat within their rough boundaries. We have aliens on the ocean floor or subterranean hominids, which would be highly surprising but not genuinely metaphysical. We have a lot of talk about some of the different things that cultures and traditions have recorded, and really it gets into different non-conventional human intelligences. And the book that was written, The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns, and Fairies, which talks about the different non-human intelligences in pre-modern traditions and what we can take away from that. It bears emphasis that while Kirk took these traditions and reports seriously, he was hardly credulous. He justified his modest inquiry into such phenomena by reflecting how much is written of pygmies, fairies, nymphs, sirens, apparitions, which, though not a tenth part true, yet could not spring of nothing. And while contemporary readers might feel justified in thinking all such reports are now intrinsically incredible, this arguably has more to do with a metaphysical prejudice than with any growth in empirical or theoretical acquaintance with the world. One does not need to believe in fairies to grasp there is no good reason why one ought not to. To see the world as inhabited by these vital intelligences, or to believe that behind the outward forms of nature there might be an unperceived realm of intelligent order, is simply to respond rationally to one of the ways in which the world seems to address us when we intuit simultaneously its rational frame and the depth of mystery it seems to hide from us. I really do like that. That quote is from the philosopher and theologian David Bentley Hart. Let's now bring the discussion to back where we started, the empirical mystery of UAP. Myths of lost or underground civilizations are fascinating, but people might be tempted to leave such ideas in the realm of speculative literature and esoteric religion. However, the reason the CTH is being invoked is because of the two empirical mysteries noted above around UAP activity, underwater and relation to underground or underwater entry points. We do not merely mean UAP have been observed in these locations, even if such sightings may be what encouraged people to consider this hypothesis to begin with. After all, an underwater UAP could still be extraterrestrial, interdimensional, extratempestrial, etc. You get it. Rather, what might tip the balance of probability towards a CTF specific interpretation would be indications of a relatively permanent NHI base, uh, NHI presence on or around Earth, possibly involving some kind of base. In that respect, some argue that there is such evidence, albeit contentious and contested. Here we briefly note only a few examples. Though it is beyond our scope to be exhaustive, including suggestions of bases underground, underwater, and on the moon. So I'm just going to briefly kind of summarize the paragraphs here. They talk about Antarctica and how there has been some evidence that there may be some bases there in terms of locations for UAPs and NHIs. Honestly, if I were to want to hide from Homo sapiens, from humans, I'd probably pick Antarctica. Hopefully, I would have evolved to not be sensitive to the cold. Then we have some discussion about the area in Dulce, New Mexico. Here we were talking about the allegations that are have confusion and mystery. Claims of an NHI base there are thought to have first arisen from Albuquerque businessman Paul Benowitz. Though it transpires he had been fed disinformation by UFOologist Bill Moore and an Air Force intelligence operative called Richard Doty, who had corroborated this claim, possibly to distract him from genuine U.S. military bases in the area. However, the rumor has persisted, particularly because of Phil Schneider, who publicly claimed before his untimely death in 1996, ostensibly by suicide, that he had been employed there as an engineer and that it was in fact jointly operated by the U.S. military and a NHI species, with the latter having long been original occupants of the mesa and who were more recently encountered with the military were constructing their base. It goes without saying that these claims have not been substantiated. Nevertheless, some people close to the UAP topic think they should be considered. There are also allegations of NHI bases underwater. For context, by some estimates, more than 80% of the Earth's oceans remain unexplored and uncharted, not merely because of their immense size, but also due to factors such as limited visibility. Indeed, scientists investigating these unknown territories continue to make startling discoveries. An exploration of the Gulf of Alaska recently retrieved a mysterious golden orb from about 3,300 meters underwater. And although believed to be biological in origin, researchers have no idea what it is and are reportedly trying to ascertain if it is associated with a known species. While somewhat humbling to be stumped by its finding, it serves as a reminder of how little we know about our own planet and how much is left to learn and appreciate about our ocean. Such a good point. A third site of intrigue is the moon, and particularly its far side, which remains perennially hidden from view. Indeed, all possible cryptoterrestrial locations, out of all of them, it has attracted the most speculation, with many strands of intriguing evidence accumulating over the years of differing levels of ambiguity and quality, giving rise to many claims of variable credibility. Indeed, some observers suggest the moon itself is very strange, characterized as recently noted by Avi Loeb in 2024 by numerous extraordinary coincidences regarding its size, behavior, and composition. As a result, some have speculated that the entire object may be an artificial NHI construction. Perhaps the most keenly studied stories are those associated with NASA missions and observations. Most directly, there is apparent photographic evidence in the public domain, which, while not confirmatory of NHI, does at least seem anomalous and hard to explain, and which some have interpreted as lunar bases. Although skeptics have sought to find various naturalistic explanations for these with varying degrees of plausibility. Relatably, some NASA whistleblowers, such as Carl Wolf and Ken Johnston, claim that even more conclusive photographic evidence of potential bases exists, but that NASA has actively sought to deny, suppress, and conceal such information. Finally, there are the views of the actual Apollo astronauts, and although none have said it publicly, at least, have encountered such bases. Many have been vocal about their beliefs in NHI, and most famously, Edgar Mitchell, who is on record in 2008 as saying, "Yes, there have been ET visitations. There have been crash craft and bodies recovered. We are not alone in the universe. They have been coming here for a long time." In any case, whatever the validity of these claims, scientists like Davies and Wagner have proposed specifically searching for alien artifacts on the moon, giving that A, extraterrestrial NHIs may well have engaged with it at some point in the history of the solar system, and moreover, B, unlike Earth, the lunar environment could preserve artifacts for millions of years. Congratulations, we made it to the conclusion. This paper has made the case for taking seriously the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis as a potential explanation for UAP, while noting that it probably ranks lower than other hypotheses, such as extraterrestrial explanation, although such calculations are hard to quantify. To be precise, the material above actually contains 4 different cryptoterrestrial hypotheses, all which would involve entities existing in stealth during recent human history and possibly even before the emergence of Homo sapiens. So the 4 categories were 1, the human cryptoterrestrials, a technologically advanced ancient human civilization that was largely destroyed long ago by the flood, for example, but continued to exist in remnant form. The second is the hominid or theropod cryptoterrestrials, a technologically advanced non-human civilization consisting of some terrestrial animal which evolved to live in stealth. For example, underground, perhaps a hominid, or alternatively, a species much more distantly related to us. Then we have our third category, former extraterrestrial or extraterrestrial cryptoterrestrials. Extraterrestrial aliens, or our intertemporal descendants who arrived on Earth from elsewhere in the cosmos or from the human future, respectively, and concealed themselves in stealth. And the fourth was the magical cryptoterrestrials, where we have entities which are less like homegrown aliens and more like earthbound angels, relating to the world inhabited by humans in ways that are less technological than magical, who are known in European languages by many names like fairies, elves, nymphs, and the like. So I can't wait to hear what you think. I know a lot of this I had to rush through. So if there's an area you want me to dive back into, please let me know. I certainly appreciate your time and hope that you found some valuable information. Till next time, take care.